All right. So today we're going to talk about an upcoming deck in OP09 that a lot of people are really pumped for, including myself. Is Shanks. Shanks is very fun to play if you haven't played him on the simulator. And there's actually quite a bit of different builds out there that work because the core of the deck is get to 10 Dawn, drop heavy hitters that affect the game state. So today we're going to go over some of the cards that people are running that are getting kind of pricey, and maybe we can find some cheap alternatives, cards that do similar stuff that might be able to work out in your favor, or at least catch your opponent by surprise. So um, what we can say is with this list right now, just this deck list, this is just an example of someone who topped recently. They ran 4 of these Marcos, which pop, and this card's probably about $15 right now, $13. So it's pretty good price-wise if you're trying to sell. Um, Also, it's just a good card in general to have a playset of. But really what we're here to talk about is these expensive Silver's Rayleigh. So let's go over here to this. Silver's Rayleigh is costing you about $35 right now. So, it's a very good card. Let's not say that it's a bad card by any means. It's expensive for a card game. So if you are someone who wants to not spend as much money, we can try a different build out. You could do playtesting on the simulator, or maybe just try something out that you may not see other people running as much. And yes, this card is very good, but maybe at your 8 Dawn turn you make a different play. So let's talk about cards that you could put in place of this. Because also keep in mind, like this card's very good, but if you're playing against Blackbeard, you may not be able to use this card for several turns. So keep that in mind. Also, one thing I wanted to point out is this new searcher for Shanks deck in OP09, Uta, is actually a film card. And I'm sure those of you who don't know, there's a film searcher that came out in OP06. So the film searcher is Monkey D. Luffy. So in theory, you could run this, and on your turn 2 play, if you open this, you could drop this, and if you hit this, you could then drop this. But you could also use this Luffy to search the 10 drop Shanks that pops a 10k or less. So that could be, you know, your 8 Dawn turn. You don't have Rayleigh, but you have stuff like this in your hand, and you search for the 10 drop that can pop cards on the board. Something else that you could add, just spice up the deck a little bit. You could add a card like this, which it is on play, and it may not get its effect, and it's also not a counter, but it's just an idea. So and it's a really cheap idea. We're talking 10 cents, right? That is something to talk about. Is this is also a 10-cent card. So um, if you were to play this, reduce the card to 0, and if you already had an established Whitebeard on the board, the 7 drop, you could then just rest it and pop pretty much anything on the board. I can't imagine there being something that you can't pop unless it has the effect to not be KO'd. So something else to think about is, you could drop this for 7 and on the same turn activate if you have 10 Dawn to KO a 5k or less. So you don't have to have something on the board to like Whitebeard to pop a card. You could have Blue Dragon Sealwater Stream to pop a card for you. But something that's cool about this card is, yes, it's 5 cents, but also searchable. It's a film, right? And also, if you have an established 10 drop Shanks from the new set coming out, it does minus 1k on your turn and your opponent's turn. So you can pop 5ks on your opponent's turn on trigger, which everybody likes popping cards. Think about Blue Doffy deck. Most of the cards they're summoning are 5ks or less until they get to the end game, and even then they're still dropping a bunch of 5ks or less. This card could trigger for free, pop a 5k or less if you have an established Shanks already on the board. So that's pretty cool. Something else to talk about is if you are trying to play cards that are going to dodge the on play, something interesting is, why not run multiple on KO pop abilities, right? All the other decks are popping, so why not pop some cards yourself? So something that's cool about this card is if you were to play in the new red Sanji leader, you could drop this card and give it rush immediately, and if they kill it, it kills something. So just wanted to go over some red cards. If you got the money, by all means, buy the card. If you don't got the money, there are cheap alternatives out there to spice up the deck a little bit, and people may not expect or see it coming. So you can run, on your second turn when you have 3 Dawn, you could drop a Monkey D. Luffy, and you hit a Uta, then drop a Uta, and you can hit, any of your Shanks deck after that. So, because also keep in mind that, with Rayleigh being former Roger Pirates, it's not searchable. So that is something that you could have over running this card. Is you may not have the potential that this card has, but you could run cards like this where it has searchable, or cards like this that are also searchable. So, all right, that's pretty much it. Give it a shot. Go on the simulator. Definitely, I always recommend play test before you spend money on it. I just will say it is a lot less money to spend on this kind of stuff than it is for the secret rares. So keep that in mind. All right, so now we're going to go over some cards for the Blackbeard deck that are going up in price. So first, let's start off with, I do like this how simplistic this deck is. You don't really have that many cards, at least in general, when people run this deck. They run 4 copies of almost everything that they play. And so we're just going to go over someone that topped recently with Blackbeard. And one of the things I really wanted to mention was a lot of these cards come out in OP09. And so we're really just looking at Finger Gun and Laboon. And really, honestly, we're looking at Laboon because the price of Laboon has been crazy. $25 for a super rare, and that's unverified. So you're really spending $28, $29, and if you want someone with 4, $28, right? That's very expensive for what it does. Now, it is a good card, good stat line, not searchable. Something to think about. So let's go ahead, and if we're going to run something that's not searchable, why not run something that we can spend a lot less on, right? Yes, this is a different card. It's Navy. Most Blackbeard decks aren't going to run stuff that can search this card, right? But it's also an activate main, and it does -2, and it's also a 2K. So you can play for 1 less Dawn, play this card, -2 to their board, or to something on their board, or not play the card at all and use it as a 2K counter. So something to think about. Something else is you could also run this card with it. This card can't be KO'd by battle by leaders. And it's activate main, rest this character, give up to one of your characters -2 during this turn. Your opponent's characters. So something about this is no counter, but for a 2/3, -2, and it can't be KO'd by leaders. So if you pop their board and their leader is the only thing left to swing with next turn, and you're not playing against Rush, then yeah, you have this card just sitting there and -2 every turn. So I really think that these are cheap alternatives to this card. If you want to get, spend $8 instead of spending $100, right? Plus, spend $8, play this. And if you want to spend a little more and still spend less than Laboon, spice it up with this new alt art of this card, which looks kind of cool. Still going to spend less, $8. Something else is kind of an interesting card to go over is the Gum Gum Bell. I don't really see anybody running this card, but it is kind of interesting. Activate main, add 1 card from the top of your life to your hand, give an opponent's character -7. So yeah, you are taking your own life, but for 2 Dawn, -7, that's crazy. And on trigger, you get to make it to where you're adding back 2 drops, which I believe you run a lot of 2 drops. So 2, 2, 2. So think about that. So yeah, you'll be able to add back a 2 drop from your trash. This deck generically runs quite a bit of 2 or less, right? But also this is a 2 or less. So something to think about is you can add this back, right? So you can do -7. Maybe you have a card in your hand that already pops a card, and then you could also play this, right? So something like that, right? So that's just some ideas on what you can run over purchasing a $30 Laboon, at least temporarily. Like, you never know, over a few weeks after the set comes out, cards like this may go down. If the deck sees a ton of success, then cards like this will do nothing but go up, right? But the hype is usually a thing, and so, temporarily run something like this to save money. Maybe Laboon goes down to $15, and maybe that's more in the price range that you're willing to spend. Me personally, I don't want to buy a $30 card unless unless it's absolutely needed. So like if it's part of the deck core and you feel like you have to have it, go for it. Laboon is not searchable. It is obviously good in the deck. That's why people are having success with it. But other cards can be good in the deck too. So that's something to think about. All right, so another card that we want to go over is a lot of people are playing the 4-drop Kuzan, which has an on play and no counter. But what a lot of people like about that card is, yes, it replaces itself, but also it minuses 4 when attacking. So something to think about is an alternate card or alternative card to play is this 5-drop 6K, which also has 1K power or counter. And when attacking, does the same thing as that card, right? It doesn't have an on play to replace itself, but it is a 1K counter. If you're running like a smoker deck, you might consider running some of these in your deck. First off, they are 10 cents, right? But second off, you don't have to worry about not having your on play draw, but you could also just run some of these and run Kuzan, all right? So since it's not an on play, it's just a -4 when you attack, and it's a 6K, so you can attach 1 Dawn to it, swing the perfect number 7, and try to hit life, while also minusing 4 to their cards. So cards like this, always interest me because yes, the other one has an on-play draw card, replaces itself. Yes, that's good. But instead of replacing itself, you get a 1K counter, and yeah, it is 1 more Dawn to play. But has a higher stat line, and can't complain about 10 cents. So something that people could tech against Blackbeard, tech in general. Because if you were to establish Kuzans on the board, and let's say you get 1 Kuzan on the board, and then the next turn you play this, if they don't get rid of that, and you're doing -8 a turn, and they can't get rid of these 2 cards, even if you just have 1 of each on the board, you're looking pretty good. You're gonna be -8 every time, every turn. So which 4 is a good number. It puts most things in range of popping from anything 5 or less, which a lot of people play a lot of stuff in their decks that are 5 or less, and you're putting them within the 1 or 0 range of popping, and which a lot of cards pop at 1 or 0. So just something to think about. That pretty much ends today's video with going over cards that are cheap alternatives to things that people may not think about because they're looking at meta list, which, yeah, deck lists that are successful is always the way to go if you're wanting a high success rate, but there's nothing wrong with spicing up your deck a little bit with cheap alternatives until prices start going down for the card that you actually want. If prices never go down, at least it gives you time to pick up those cards over time, maybe make some trades, stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think of all these suggestions today. Maybe play test some of these cards out into a deck. I'd be happy to hear some success rates with some of these cards. Maybe some of y'all have already been testing these and you have stories to tell. Let me know. Thanks for watching. All right, bye-bye.